Chapter 3, Part 3.2. Thomas seized the opportunity to engage in some light-hearted banter, saying sarcastically to Sheila, of course he was doing his Christmas Eve ritual, accompanied by a wink and a smile. Thomas went on to explain, while every Christmas Eve, King goes on a shopping spree around Grafton Street. He really likes his clothes, which he usually gets in London. But the one thing he loves more than purchasing clothes is purchasing shoes. Every Christmas Eve, he buys enough dress shoes to last him the entire year. He'll hop around between various stores, trying on all types of dress shoes and purchasing his favorites. He does it every year, to the point where even the stores expect him. When he finds a pair he likes, he has the store hold them, along with any others he's selected. He proceeds to move on to the next store, repeating the process. He probably puts 20 or so pairs on hold, comparing them all to one another. And when he's done with his last store, he goes back to each store and takes only the ones he had selected in his head, usually 6 or more pairs. Rosie, attempting to maintain a peaceful atmosphere, intervened. You don't need to talk about what your father does. Sheila wisely took a sip of her drink, realizing she shouldn't have sparked the conversation. Okay, Mom, Thomas conceded. I'll drop it. He might walk through the door any minute, and we could all be in trouble. At that moment, Paul, Victoria, and their 2 young daughters entered the living room. Paul instructed his daughters, aged 3 and 5, go over and wish your Nana a happy Christmas. Victoria, Paul's striking wife, approached Rosie and said, Merry Christmas, the new house is just spectacular. Rosie, who rarely smiled, was delighted to receive hugs from her granddaughters, both dressed in festive Christmas attire. Just as this heartwarming moment unfolded, King's car pulled up to the front door of the house. King had acquired the 600-acre farm in the Grant House through a foreclosure process, taking it from an elderly lady who had owned it for generations. While King's primary motivation was to acquire the land, the house was a welcome perk. The fact that he had wrestled it from an elderly woman added a bitter twist of satisfaction for King. King had bought the mortgage from an Irish bank that had given the elderly lady a loan to maintain the farm. The rising cost of inputs and taxes, following the collapse of the Celtic Tiger economy, had turned her farm into a loss-making venture. A situation orchestrated by the Irish government that affected all of Ireland's farming community. King used his legal and financial prowess to manipulate auction processes, ensuring that he was the sole bidder and always at prices below market value. Due to public scrutiny, King's name never appeared on any bid or purchase documentation. Instead, it was usually a convoluted chain of companies and trusts spanning several jurisdictions, making it nearly impossible to trace the true purchaser back to King himself. King entered the front door of the house, his driver following with several bags containing boxes of new shoes, as Thomas had predicted. King's social calendar was well stocked for this Christmas season, with each event likely requiring a different pair of shoes. King sighed with irritation at the thought of not spending Christmas at Blackstaff Manor, but Rosie's condition had dictated that everyone come to her for the festivities. Yearning for a few more moments of solitude before engaging in the holiday celebration, King took a seat in the formal living room, where he had a clear view of the Christmas tree and the roaring fire. He pulled a pair of new shoes from one of the boxes and began replacing his muddy footwear, which he placed back in the box for Brennan to polish later. As King settled into the chair, the door leading to the hallway opened and Victoria, Paul's wife, entered the room. She greeted King with a courteous Happy Christmas and complimented the house, inquiring about the location of the bathroom. King pointed her in the right direction but became irritated when Victoria mentioned that she had heard he was back at Blackstaff. He questioned her sharply, demanding to know who had told her about his whereabouts, revealing a side of himself that Victoria was not accustomed to seeing. Stammering slightly, Victoria explained that she believed Mrs. King had mentioned it. She excused herself to use the bathroom, feeling anxious about the encounter with King. From the bathroom, Victoria kept a close watch on King as he tested out his new shoes, hoping to make a swift exit to the family room without encountering him. As she prepared to leave the bathroom, the door to the living room opened and Paul appeared, asking if Victoria had found the bathroom. Upon seeing King in the living room, Paul acknowledged his presence and inquired about Victoria's whereabouts. King confirmed that Victoria had gone to the bathroom. As Victoria stepped out of the bathroom, she tried to deflect Paul's concern by mentioning she had been texting her mother. Paul appeared somewhat confused but accepted her explanation. They headed towards the living room together. King called Paul over and Paul approached him, asking if everything was okay. When King questioned whether Paul had told Victoria about his presence at Blackstaff, Paul explained that their mother had mentioned it as an excuse for King's tardiness. He assured King that everything was fine and asked if there was any further concerns. King, still displeased but avoiding a confrontation, instructed Paul to inform Rosie that he would be joining the rest of the family shortly and to send Brennan into the room. Paul agreed and left to carry out King's request, grateful that he had managed to defuse the situation for the time being.